welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. For 50 years, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. I'm Lauren Lane, the Marketing and Communications Manager for LSI and one of the producers of this podcast. Thanks for joining us today. In this episode, Sean is joined by Utah Senate President Stuart Adams to discuss the incredible relationship that LSI and the Senate have shared over the past 50 years. President Adams has a fascinating political career, and we were so excited to sit down and chat with him for a few minutes. If you have any questions about LSI or how we can help your team start winning, please email us at social@lsiwins.com. We'd love to stay in touch with you and answer any questions you might have. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy our conversation with President Adams.
Hey, President Adams. Well, thanks for doing this. I know you're so busy, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. We started doing these podcasts during COVID, and it's really caught on. We're doing our clients and our team and a lot of governments from around the country. A lot of the state and municipal governments are listening to this podcast. We've done about 60 of them. We've done this year a lot of focus on IIJA and what kind of funding is coming to especially states and municipalities from the various federal agencies. So I've wanted to have this discussion with you for some time, and I think it'll be really relevant, and honored to have you do this recording with me. We've been friends a long time, and I've really admired your work for the last 30 years. So thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I mean, it's so difficult to be able to try to deal with contracting with the federal government, and LSI has done an amazing job. You've done a great job in Utah, but for people everywhere. So it's been a great thing to see what you've been able to accomplish.
Thank you. In preparing for this, I was trying to think of when you and I first met, but I think it was 1995. There was this special group that came together on, if you remember, the Northern Utah Legislative Affairs Committee. I think that's when you and I met. You may have a different recollection, but you remember Sheldon Kilpack and Kurt Oda and Jerry Stevenson, who was the mayor of Layton at the time, and Todd Weiler and Mike Bowis and all of these superstars that went on to do great things. We had that little group. Brad Wilson was part of that group, and we started this Northern Utah Legislative Affairs Committee that then turned into the Northern. Davis, Northern Utah Legislative.
Utah Caucus, but the caucus, but also the chambers. We moved from a local chamber into a county chamber, and then we tried to combine, at least in some of the meetings, the chambers from all of Northern Utah. So it's been a great effort, and it's been great for our economy. It's just been phenomenal as we look at Utah being the number one state in the nation. It's pretty
exactly. Yeah. So I think that was 1994, 1995 when I know that I started participating in about 1994. So that's almost 30 years ago. Can you believe that?
No, I can't. You're not that old. So.
Yeah, I really am. I really am that old. And I remember that group and how passionate everybody was about making a positive impact on Northern Utah at the time, and Utah in general. And as I said, there were so many alumni that came out of that group that went on to do amazing things and serve in leadership but at the time I didn't think that you had this plan to go into politics. Maybe you're a businessman, and you and I were participating, I think, from a perspective of our businesses, and why we were involved, but talk about your background and how you became interested in politics.
Yeah, I really didn't plan on it either, Sean, and that was probably the reason I was here. But I was involved on a planning commission at Layton City, and spending a couple of nights a month on a planning commission. And now Senator Stevenson, Jerry Stevenson at the time, Councilman Stevenson, decided he'd run for mayor.
I remember.
And I had no desire to run for anything. But I think it might have been because I was already spending a couple of nights a month at the city. And I moved to the east side of Layton, up above Highway 89, and Highway 89 didn't have lights. I think I had a lot of people come to me and ask me to run, and I had no desire. And there are two things that changed my mind. One is my dad is fiercely patriotic, and he told me I needed to serve. And the other is I have a close friend. He's now a county commissioner, Bob Stevenson. We went to school together. And he and I were on Highway 89 in a rainstorm in our car, and we started to do circles, hydroplane. And he reminded me of how I drove when I was in high school. And he said, "You're a better driver now. You can get across the highway," because there weren't lights on Highway 89. There were no semaphore lights, no stoplights.
Right. That's right.
And my oldest daughter was turning 16. And he said, "I'm not worried about you getting across without being hit, but I'm worried about our kids." And between that and my dad, I went down and filed. And that's why, and it's a long history after that, but got involved in transportation stuff. But I had really no desire, but it's been a great thing. And one of the things that I think why Utah is such a great state, we have a very short legislative session. But I believe when legislators have a vested interest, some people call it conflicts, but I think it's a vested interest in making sure that the laws we pass, we have to go live with. You get better legislation, you get better product. And when you're dependent on the economy that you're creating, you also have a different focus than you have, I think, if you're a full-time legislator, if you're full-time employee. So I think that's a secret of Utah, and it's somewhat the same in other states, but it's made a difference. It's been a long time now.
I have had the opportunity to work with so many legislators across the U.S. over the last 30 years, and I agree with you that Utah is so unique, having a 45-day session, and none of our legislators they're essentially volunteer legislators that put in a whole lot of time and take a lot of abuse, I think, for their service. I have worked with legislators around the country, and you have become such a talented legislator. Your approach and your strategy and the way you write your legislation is just remarkable, and it's no wonder that you're the president of the Senate and have done such amazing things. How did you do that? How did you go from business and no background in politics to being this very accomplished legislator and the president of the Senate?
But you combine, the answer to your question is you combine your expertise from your private business, and politics is just an extension of that, and good sound economic and fiscal advice. I mean, Utah is, without question in my mind, we have a AAA bond rating. We're one of the most fiscally prudent states in the nation. We've got the best economy in the nation. We did a tax cut last year. We've funded $1 billion in transportation, record spending for education. That doesn't happen without good, when I say fiscal management. And I think we need more people who have had to run their own businesses and understand how to make it through a bad economy and how to prepare and make sure that economic development happens. I just believe that they're connected. And I think when you make good, sound decisions, I think whether in politics or in your own business, I think it's almost the same.
I agree. I mean, we talk about this a lot, looking at the balance sheet of the state, and you're so good at that because you've had this career as a business owner and have done so well in your business. You've been able to take those concepts and scale that to the state, and it's worked. You and I work closely. You mentioned some of the projects that I was going to bring up as I think back on our relationship. The enhanced use lease, the EUL on the west side of Hill Air Force Base. When we went to the Pentagon and to the Congress and said, this is what we want to do, and we need language to allow us to make this happen. They all thought this was crazy, that there's no way that this is going to work, that you'll never get a consensus from the installation, from the cities, from the counties. And we pulled this off, and it was remarkable how many different organizations we had to get to buy off on this. And then you're right. Now Falcon Hill is the benchmark for enhanced use leases around DOD. I've had so many installations and communities come look at the EUL as the benchmark, as the model for how to do this successfully. We worked closely when you were in the House in the early 2000s, and you helped us with this project with the governor's office and working with companies in the state of Utah to help them win new business, which is, I think, it has been the foundation for a lot of the economic stability, the economic success that we have achieved as a state. And you were instrumental in that, all of that policy that happened, I think, between about 2002, 2004. And then when you left the House, I never thought you'd be back. I remember having this conversation.
I
remember having this conversation with you, and you said, "I'm done. I've done it. I've done all of it." You had been voted the legislator of the year. I remember that. And you'd achieved all this great stuff in the House. And I thought it was over. And what made you come back after that term in the House, which was remarkable?
Well, you're kind with your comments. And before I get to that, I want to go back. You're right. We work very closely on what I think are some very, very basic economic efforts to try to maintain economic stability in Utah. And they can't get through that process. They need somebody to help them. And that's where LSI is. It's just a shining light. And it is the solution. It's the silver bullet. And it may be the secret weapon. But you got to have an entity to be able to help with that. And that has been the underpinning of why not only has Hill done well, but I think the economy's done well, is because we've been able to maintain that workload, a lot of because of what you've done. And why I came back, I think I was forced to come back, but it happened because our governor, John Huntsman at the time, took an assignment to be ambassador to China. And new governor, Gary Herbert, who was lieutenant governor, chose Greg Bell. And Greg Bell was my senator, and he left. There was a little bit of a push to bring me back, and maybe a weak moment. Maybe that's the way I could explain it. But I did come back, which I didn't think I'd ever do.
I was shocked, but we've been so lucky to have you in the Senate and then serving in as the president, in really in a leadership role since you went back into the legislature after that little time away. And you've just enabled so much great work. And I think you said something that is so critical. You've never forgotten that this is like a business. You have got to focus on revenue, and that's going to be tied to jobs, and everything that you've done in your service in the with the state has been about job creation and what is the long-term economic impact. And there's been few legislators in our state's history that has had such an incredible legacy in the type of long-term economic impact that you've had in your work and your policy and legislation. I just, it's remarkable.
Well, you're kind again. Utah does have some, what I think are strengths. We have a birth rate that's probably double the national average, which means we have a lot of kids. Those kids become workers, and with the demand for workforce, it's a real advantage, but the challenge is educating them. And you've got to have money to educate them. And that's when the economy does well, when the private sector does well, when businesses do well, when individuals do well. Right. They pay taxes. And when they do well and pay taxes, we have more money to educate kids.
That's right.
To provide those services that are so essential for us to be able to help the next generation. And so it's very much tied to be able to, you can't educate kids without money. And you've got to have that economic development to be able to do that. And so it just isn't about economic development, but it is about the future generations. And I mentioned my dad at the very beginning, and he's been a real strong influence on my life, a phenomenal individual. But his goal was always that I think my life would be better than his. And my goal is the same. I've got 16 grandkids, and the other reason you serve is not just it's a volunteer, but I want my 16 grandchildren's lives to be better than mine. And we want economic prosperity and quality of life, and not only economics but recreational prosperity. Utah's a great spot, and that's what we're trying to do in Utah. And your leadership with LSI, I don't know where we'd be without Hill Air Force Base, without the contracting capacity that you've been able to help us with. And I'll be forever grateful for our friendship and what you've done for the state, Sean. And I could go on. We could talk about, if you wanted, the fact that we brought in a data center that would not have happened if you hadn't helped us actually mining that contract.
So great. You remember when you were in the House, you and I went down and we went to Utah County and met with one of your predecessors, who is the president of the Senate. And I can remember, I thought you were going to come unglued when I said to this former president of the Senate, I said, tell me what you know about Hill Air Force Base. And he said, well, I know that there's like F-16s up there, and there's like 3,000 or 4,000 people up there. I thought you were going to lose your mind when you said, no, there's 36,000 people that work at Hill Air Force Base every day. And you're right. It's just been this
largest employer in the state.
The largest employer in the state. And I mean, it has been a big part of the economic engine along the Wasatch Front for sure. Over the last 20 years that you've served in the legislature, is there any policy that you've been particularly proud of and that you have reflected back on in your time in the House or Senate and think this was really great work that I'm proud of?
There's so many, so many issues that I've dealt with, both economically and socially. But there is one. We were in a real challenging spot in 2015. In 2000, I think it was 4, when I was in the House, we passed a constitutional amendment defining marriage between a man and a woman.
Right.
And politically, that had a lot of support. In fact, it was a constitutional amendment. I think the people voted to place it as a constitutional amendment, 60 to 70% approved. And Judge Robert Shelby in 2013 overturned that constitutional amendment. And at the time, we started a 2015 session. We thought it was going to be a pretty big explosion between people that were offended at the Supreme Court and their ruling, and the LGBTQ community that actually thought that they were empowered from the ruling that they'd gotten. And 4 members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, their quorum of the 12, stood up and said, "We need to blend the 2 issues together." That's easy to say, but it's almost impossible to do statutorily. But that was an assignment that I took on, and at the end of the day, we passed a bill that at the bill signing, wish I had a picture of it to show you, but at the bill signing, we had the entire LGBTQ community, we had the Catholic Diocese, we had the ACLU, we had NAACP, we had the members of the first quorum of the 12 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But we found a way to protect everybody's rights. Not everyone got everything they wanted, but everyone got additional protection. And it's probably one of the more difficult issues that I've dealt with, and it's probably not economically, but I think it's tied to trying to find, in my opinion, a balance and trying to respect everyone's rights. It doesn't matter who you are; you're still an American citizen. And hopefully, as we move forward with some of the issues, our goal is to try to lift everyone, regardless of what their particular either political or other leanings are. But I think I learned a great lesson that when you protect the rights of people maybe you don't necessarily agree with, you actually give yourself greater protections. But we live in a great country and a great state. And I'm very proud that we're able to balance that.
We've worked so closely together over the years, and I've seen so much of your work and your vision. And I was there that day and remember this. And I remember how difficult it was for you and the rest of the legislature. Of all the things that you've accomplished, and that I thought you were going to tell me that was not on my list. And it just shows how compassionate and concerned you are about all of the members of the state. And that's why I admire you so much. President Adams, one of the things that I think has been so successful is that you have had this vision and that you've been able to build policy around a vision and a strategy. And what are some of the things that you see in the next 10 years or the next 50 years that you're excited about? I mean, we've worked closely on the Point of the Mountain project and the Utah Inland Port and some of these big projects along the Wasatch. But are there some things that you have envisioned in the short term, 5 to 10 years, and then in the long term in the next 50 years?
Well, in Utah, it's infrastructure. And when you start to see what we've done, and you mentioned a few of them, we talked about Falcon Hill and what might have been there. I can't even quantify the economic impact of what's been accomplished. But also when you move from there, and might have helped with the replacing the military hotel, the facility that was up on Snow Basin, and now that's Mayflower. You're probably going to see that Mayflower development as the premier. I don't think there's much question. It'll be the premier ski recreation area in the world.
I think so too.
Connected to Deer Valley, multiple 5-star hotels, 4-star hotels, boutique, maybe 6 stars. Jordan Hill Reservoir, probably some of the biggest. And when I talked about economic activity, the quality of life is phenomenal. From my house to Snow Basin is 23 minutes, and 23 minutes to downtown. But when you can have that quality of life, you mentioned the Point of the Mountain and what's happening there, and then Inland Port. And yeah, I think our future is extremely bright. Rich states, poor states, 3 economists, Art Laffer, who helped President Reagan with his tax cut, the Laffer curve, and helped President Trump with his. Steve Moore and Jonathan Williams, the three great economists. They always predict. They don't look at that past. They predict the future economies of all 50 states. And a few weeks ago, for the 15th year in a row, they rated Utah as the number one for economic outlook. And so when you look out into the future, we're spending lots of money on transportation, lots of money on recreation. And there'll be some changes. I'm kind of excited for air taxis, if you know what they are. And I think there'll be some technical and great advancements with when we're seeing some of the IT things come out. But I believe that Utah is poised. Two reasons why. One is our workforce. One is great companies like LSI, great universities, great custom fit, trying to align workforces and trying to not only get them their Air Force Base and others, but we're also trying to align that workforce with our universities. I think we're hitting on all cylinders, and I just would say that our future is about as bright as I've ever seen it. And I don't see it changing for a while.
Love it. I agree. I think it's amazing. And by the way, I was at Mayflower a week ago, and I'm so excited about what is happening there. And we started working this, and I mean, think about 2002 when you were in the House the first time, and maybe even before you were in the House, we were working on this with UDA, and it's exciting to see it happen finally.
It is. Well, it's great to be with you. So,
President, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your work, and I really have admired your career and your service and everything that you've accomplished. It's tremendous to have had this partnership with you all of these years, and I appreciate your support in enabling us to do what we do.
I think that is a little bit of our secret sauce too, is to be able to have that relationship between the public government and the private sector that you've been able to help actually facilitate. So I admire what you've done, and if you're kind to say those kind words.
You've enabled it. Thank you so much, and keep up this great work. You're an incredible individual, and I admire you so much.
Thank you.